Hey guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Nat. Today we're going to be building an Active Directory lab where we're going to be using a script that actually creates about 1,000 user accounts. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is download and install Oracle VirtualBox, which is where we're going to run our virtual machines. Next, what we're going to do is download a Windows 10 ISO and a Server 2019 ISO where we'll have two separate operating systems on two virtual machines. After everything is downloaded, what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and create our first virtual machine, which is going to be our domain controller, and this is going to house the Active Directory. So let me just go ahead and give you a overview of the lab, right? We're going to be doing the VirtualBox, Windows 10, Server 2019 here. And it's going to have two adapters. So one's actually going to be on the internet here, where it's going to be connected to your internet service provider, and then the other one's going to be this internal NIC on this side that's going to be connected to the internal private network that our clients are going to connect to, as you can see here. So after our virtual machine is created, what we're going to do is install Server 2019 on it, and then we're going to assign IP addresses for the uh, internal network. And then the external network is going to automatically get its own IP address from our internet service provider, so from your actual host device. After we have the IP addresses set up, we're going to name the server. Then we're going to install the Active Directory and create our own domain. Then we're going to configure it as well as routing so that the clients on the private network can reach the internet through the domain controller. After we're done with our domain, we're going to be setting up a DHCP domain controller. So when we create our Windows 10 machine, it can automatically get an IP address. And then the last thing that we're going to do on the domain controller before we create our virtual machine is we're going to run a PowerShell script. So that's the script where we're going to create about 1,000 user accounts. And so this will give you an idea. Briefly, what I'll do is go over how useful PowerShell can be. Um, so after creating the users, we're going to create another virtual machine and install Windows 10 on it, and that virtual machine is going to be connected to the private VirtualBox network. We're going to name that machine Client 1, as you can see here on the right, and we're going to join this client to the domain that we're going to log in, and we're going to log into it with one of our domain accounts. So at this point, our tutorial is going to be pretty much concluded. So overall, the environment that we're creating is a basic network environment that's going to be running the Active Directory and a few networking services. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is download the VirtualBox along with the extension pack. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and take a look at we're going to go to Google and you just type in VirtualBox download, and the first link pretty much works. Go ahead and download the link that is specific to your operating system, and then once that's complete, make sure that you also download the extension pack. It's very important that you do that. So then after we download the VirtualBox, the links below the video have the Windows 10 ISO and the Windows 20 and the Server 2019 ISO. So go ahead and download those, and then we're going to go ahead and wait for the VirtualBox to finish downloading. I've already downloaded it, as you can see here. So once you've completed all the steps, just go through it, just follow the instructions, and go ahead and complete that, and it'll look like this. So once you've downloaded the Windows 10 and the Server 2019, go ahead and we're going to begin creating this. Select New, and then we're going to go ahead and name our machine DC. So the DC stands for Domain Controller, and select Windows 2019. Hit Next, And as far as memory size, it just depends on how much RAM your machine has. I'm just gonna go ahead and give it about 4 GB. So you can select it based on it'll give you an idea of how much you have down here. Go ahead and hit create and next and then next and create. Okay, so now the server 19 machine is created, but there's nothing on it yet. So we're going to need to go to settings. I'll go ahead and right click settings and then click system, go to processor, and you can pick the number of cores based on how many your system has. It just speeds things up a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and put 2 on mine here. Now we're going to go to network. And remember, so we're creating the domain controller right now, so we need to have 2 NICs. So one of those is for the internet and one to assign IP addresses for our internal clients on the network. So we're going to select adapter 2. We're going to checkbox that. We're going to hit the enable network. And then what we're going to do is in the drop-down menu, we're going to select internal network. Then we're going to hit the OK, go to storage. And so here under the storage, where it says storage devices, you're going to want to click the empty. And then on the right side here, where it has like an optical drive icon, we're going to go ahead and select choose disk file and find that 2019 ISO file that you downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and click choose disk file. And for this one, let's see the one that I downloaded. So it looks like it'll be this one right here. So once you've selected your file, go ahead and hit OK. And now we can run server 2019. So let's double click the domain controller or the DC machine that we just created. So the process can take a while. So, I'll cut the video from time to time during like the installations just to kind of make it quicker for you. And also just keep in mind that your system is going to reboot a number of times as we go through this as well. So on the setup window, I'm going to go ahead, select next, install now. And so it's starting up here. So I'll go ahead and pause it and bring it right back. Okay, so here where you have the window set up, you have different selections here. The one that you want to pick is the desktop experience because otherwise, if you pick one of the other ones, you'll be stuck on a command line. So you want to use that you want to use the GUI, the graphical user interface. So go ahead and hit next. Hit accept, basically sign your life away, hit next. And then what we're going to do is the custom install. And since this is where you would have all your disks would show, but since it's the only one that we have, just go ahead and hit next. And so yeah, so this is the part where it's going to take a while. So I'm just going to go ahead and edit this out and then I'll come right back. Okay, so it looks like that portion is complete. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is create an admin account. So this is the built-in administrator account. So we'll just create a simple password. We'll just make it password one. So capital P A S S W O R D 1. Re-enter the same password. P A S S W O R D 1. So just keep it simple. Definitely don't want to do this in a production situation, but for the purposes of the lab, it's fine. Go ahead and hit finish. Okay. So for this, you see how it says press Control Alt Delete. So if you keep pressing it, nothing happens. What you need to do is you need to come up here to the top. You press Input, Keyboard, and then click on the Control Alt Delete. Then you'll be able to log in. So when you're prompted, if so, let me go ahead and put the password PASSWORD1. So go ahead and wait for it to load up. Looks like it's going to take a second. I'll just go ahead and be right back. Okay, so it looks like the Windows is loading up now. So when you're prompted if you want the PC to be discoverable, go ahead and click yes. And the first thing that we're going to do is install something that's called VM Guest Editions. So at the top of the screen where it says devices, go ahead and click and then insert Guest Editions CD image. Then what you're going to go ahead and do, let's put this down and minimize this, minimize this. You're going to go to File Explorer, click on this PC, and then double click on the CD drive. So the reason we're doing this is you'll kind of notice that it's a bit laggy, and if you try to change the size of the screen, it doesn't adjust. So this is going to help with that. This is going to actually give you a smoother user experience. So go ahead and download the AMD 64 version. Click this here, and then just keep clicking next all the way through. Next, next, install, and then let that run through. And so before you click finish, you definitely want to switch to I want to manually reboot later. For some reason, if you hit the reboot now, the changes don't happen, and it's kind of annoying. So go ahead and just wait for it to download. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. I want to manually reboot later. Hit finish, and then we'll just go ahead and shut it down. And then once this is complete, we'll just go ahead and boot it back up. Double click, and we are on our way. And then let's just go ahead and let it do its thing. And so you're going to notice that it's a lot smoother, and you'll actually be able to adjust the screen size once it loads up, of course. Okay, so let's log back in. Remember, hit keyboard, insert Control Alt Delete. Our simple password of password1, enter. Okay, so now you'll notice the lag is gone, and we can actually, well, sometimes it takes a minute. So let's go ahead and adjust the screen size. So yeah, so now we're actually able to adjust that. So what we're going to do is set up our IP addresses. If we take a look back at our diagram, let's take a look at it here. So you'll see that we have the external NIC, for the internet. So we don't need to configure anything for that one because it's going to automatically connect to the internet from our host machine. And then the internal NIC for assigning the IP addresses, and we're going to need to manually set this one up. So in the bottom right of the screen, if we go back to our machine here, in the bottom right, you're going to see a network looking icon. Go ahead and click on that. Click network. And then what we need to do is change the adapter options. You'll see two adapters if we go to change adapter options. And then once we figure out which is which, we'll name them accordingly. So right click on the first one, click status, and then details. And so you see how this one has a 169.254, so that's what's called a PIPA address. Basically what that means is that the device only has a local connection and it can't access the internet. So the device will assign itself in a PIPA address, which is an automatic private internet protocol address. And so it can at least communicate locally. Typically this happens if there's an issue with the DHCP or the dynamic host configuration protocol, and this is the server that assigns that IP address. So go ahead and close this one out, close, and then let's take a look at the next one, status and details. And so you see it has like a 10.0.2.15. Yours may be may be different, just depends on it's based on your network. And so this is the one, this is the adapter that's receiving the internet access. So we're going to go ahead and rename each one accordingly. So for this one, let's go ahead and rename it. We're going to call it something obvious, just so we uh, can configure it later. I'll call this one internet. So that way we can have that one set up. And then we're going to rename this one, and we'll just call it internal. Okay, so now we can assign an IP address. So we're going to go ahead and right click on internal, and then what we're going to do is go to the properties, and then we're going to change the IPv4 settings. Let's go ahead and double click on that. So click on use the following IP address, and so if we look back at our diagram, where it says IP 172.16.0.1, that's going to be our IP address, and it has the subnet mask of 255, 255, 255.0, and then we're just going to leave the default gateway, and because the domain controller is going to serve as the default gateway, so it's going to use itself as the default gateway or its own router. So the IP address of 172.16, let me go ahead and actually write that down. So 172.16.0.1, and we're going to give it a subnet mask of 255.255.255. And then as for the DNS, when we install Active Domain, it's going to automatically install DNS, so the server is actually going to use itself as the DNS server. So with that, we have a couple options. We can actually use its own IP address, which is the 172.16.0.1, or we can just use the universal loopback, which is the 127.0.0.1. And just kind of overview, I know I threw out a lot of like acronyms and words, but basically the subnet mask divides an IP address into two parts. You have the host portion, which is your computer, and then the network portion that the computer belongs to. The DNS, or the domain name service, is what is used to resolve IP addresses in domain names. So basically the names of websites. For example, 8.8.8.8 is one of the IP addresses associated with google.com. And the 127.0.0.1 is the universal phone home IP address. So if you want to ping your own system, you can use this IP address on your own device to check if there's local connectivity issue. So the next thing that we're going to do is rename the PC because it has an arbitrary one. So let me go ahead and hit OK and hit OK and then go ahead and exit out of that. So let's go ahead and right click the start menu. Oh, no, not the host device. Here we go. So right click, go to system, and then we're going to rename this PC. Because if you look at it right now, it has this, Win7C, all this, gobbledygook, right? So we're going to simplify the name. We're just going to call it DC for domain controller. It's just going to be a lot easier to keep track of when we're configuring everything. So go ahead and restart now and hit continue. Okay, so we're going to log back in. Now, just to recap, so far what we've done is we've created our virtual machine, and then of course we have our external NIC, and then we've just configured our internal NIC, assigning it an IP address. So next what we're going to do is download Active Directory domain services. So let's look back at our chart. So this is where we are right now. So we have the external NIC here, internal, and then so right now we're going to be doing this portion right here and create our own domain. So let's go back to the machine. Just wait for it to bring up the Active Directory or the server manager. Okay, so so the server manager's loaded up. So let's go ahead and where you see it, yeah, so the Active Directory domain services. So what we're going to do is where it says add roles and features, click that. I'm going to go ahead and click next and then next again. And so you see this is the computer that the name of our domain controller that we created or that we renamed rather. Go ahead and hit next. And so now what you're going to do is choose Active Directory Domain Services right here. Go ahead and click that. Go ahead and add features. Hit next. And then just keep clicking next until you get to the install portion. And then so yeah, this kind of takes a while, so I'll just go ahead and cut it and then I'll be right back. Okay, so now that Active Directory Domain Services is installed, go ahead and close this. You'll notice, let me go ahead and close this out actually. So you'll notice up here in the upper right hand corner, it has this yellow triangle and it's got like next to the flag. Go ahead and click on that. So this is the post-deployment configuration. In other words, we've downloaded the domain service, but we haven't created the domain yet. So what we're going to do is click here. We're going to say add a new forest. And as the domain, just for simplicity, we'll just call it mydomain.com. And oh, it didn't. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I guess I thought I clicked on it. Mydomain.com and hit next. Let it do its thing. And then for here, we're just going to type in the same password that we made for our login. That way, yeah, so it's going to be the same password for everything that we do. password one, password one, and then hit next, and just keep clicking next. So let it do its thing. So you'll notice now it has has my domain written here. Click next. Okay. Go ahead and click next, and then next again. Okay, so now go ahead and hit install. And then it's just, and then like at the end of this, it's going to automatically reboot the machine for us. So yeah, it'll take a while. Okay, so it is about to sign us out. Go ahead, hit the close, and yep, there we go. Gonna restart. Okay, so after rebooting, you'll notice that the login screen now says my domain / administrator now. So let's go ahead and log in. Okay, so what we're going to do now is create a dedicated admin account instead of using the built-in default admin account. So we're going to go to Start once it loads up, and then Administrative Tools, Active Directory, Users and Computers. Just give it a second to load up. So now under our newly created domain, mydomain.com, go ahead and right click, hit new, and select organizational unit. So new organizational unit. And so here, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and take a look see here. Okay, yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to put our admin account in this organizational unit. Think of it like a folder in Active Directory. So we're going to name this admins. So we're going to do underline admins. And then uncheck this box right here because it's just going to be annoying to delete it later if it's checked. So go ahead and uncheck, hit OK. Now what we're going to do is drop down menu where our new folder that we just created, the admins, we're going to go ahead and right click that, and under new we're going to say user, and then go ahead and just put your own name. So for me it's Nat Kennedy. And then for the username, or since this is going to be the admin, I'm just going to put A for admin dash first initial and then last name Kennedy. And so go ahead and click next, and then use the same password and confirm after that. So what we're going to select is password never expires. And again, this is just for the just for the lab purposes. It just makes it easier throughout the process. And then select finished. And so now our account's created. However, it's still not an admin account despite naming it that way because we have to make it a member of the domain admins group. So right click the username and click properties. So if we go to users. Sorry, no, if we go to admin, there we go. If we go to admin, right click, and then what you're going to want to do is go to properties. So yeah, click properties, and then go to member of, and then type in, go ahead and type domain admins. Let's see here. So domain users, we're going to type in domain admins, check the name, and then so it selected it for us, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. So now it's part of the domain admins account. So now we'll go ahead and use this. So hit apply, hit OK, and we're just going to log out of our domain controller. So let's go ahead and do that. So sign out, and then Control Delete. And then instead of logging into the My Domain administrator, what we're going to do is we're going to select Other User. And so go ahead and you see how down here now it says we're signing into the My Domain. So we're going to use the username that we just created. So whatever the A dash whatever your name is. So NKENNEDY, and then the password. So we're just going to keep it the same, PASSWORD1. Okay, so now let's take a look at the diagram one more time. So the next item on our list is to install the RAS and NAT, which is the remote access server, and network address translation, which is what we're going to do next. So the reason behind what we're doing this for is that when we create our Windows 10 client, it's going to allow the client to be on this virtual private network, but still be able to access internet through the domain controller. So to do this, what we'll do is, actually, let's go ahead and look back at the server manager. So yeah, so to do this, what we're going to do is click on Add Roles and Features, click Next, click Next, and then for the roles, we're going to select Remote Access. So Remote Access, click Next, 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 and then click Routing, Add Features, and so it'll automatically select this one here, the RAS, the Direct Access and VPN. Hit Next, Next, Next again, just do it all the way through, click install, and then let it do its thing, and then I'll go ahead and cut it back and be right back to this point. Okay, so now that that's done, go ahead and close this, and then if you look up and to the right where it says tools, go ahead and click tools here. You're going to click on routing and remote access, like here. And then once that pops up, you're going to right click on DC local and configure and enable routing and remote access. So go ahead and click the first option there. Go ahead and select next. Select network address translation. So that's going to be this one right here. And then hit next. And so here, this is why we actually name these the obvious names that we gave them, so we could tell which one is which. So we'll select the internet one for the public interface. So select internet and then hit next and go ahead and hit finish. Go ahead and hit OK, and then just go ahead and let that load. So you see how it's red right now, right? So once this is finished, it'll turn green. See, there you go. So now it is green. So we are fully configured. So now when we set up the Windows 10 client, it should be able to get to the internet after we configure the DHCP server. So What this is going to allow our Windows 10 client to do is get an IP address that we will give it access to the internet even though they are on a private network. So to set up the DHCP, what we're going to do is go back to add roles and features. So let me go ahead and put this down, add roles and features, and next, next. And see how now it has the domain, the dc.mydomain.com. And so we're going to go ahead and select DHCP server right here, add features, hit next, 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 and install. Okay, so to set up the DHCP, we're just going to go back to add roles and features. So let me go ahead and close. And let me see here. So now that that's actually done installing, let's go ahead and go to tools. I can just get the mouse to work for me. So yeah, so let's go ahead and DHCP and let's let that load up. And so what we're going to do is configure our scope. So just looking back at the diagram, let's take one more look at it. So if we look back at the diagram, we have a range set up here of 172.16.0.100 to 200, and then the subnet mask of 255.255.255. Okay, so what you'll notice is like both of these. If so, so let's take a look here. So yeah, it's had a little technical difficulty there. So yeah, so if we go back to our DHCP server, go ahead and click down here. You'll notice that both of the IPv4 and 6 are down. So what we're going to do is right click on IPv4 and select new scope. And then the easiest name to give the scope, typically you just, just give it the range of the IP addresses that we'll be using. So in this case, we're just going to name it, let's see if we can get it to work. Okay, so I figured out what was going on. So you saw how it's green now, right? So basically, if you're having an issue, what I did was I right-clicked on the domain. So you right-click here, and right now it says unauthorized. For you, it'll say authorized. Just go ahead and allow it to authorize and click on that, and then right-click it again, and then hit refresh, and then you'll see that it should pop up and look good for you. Okay, so now we can actually right click um, this section right here. And so if we go ahead and right click new scope, okay, here we go. Now we're cooking. Okay, go ahead and hit next. And so we're going to name it 172. If I can get the numbers to work. So yeah, so 172.16.0.100 dash 200 because that's the range that we're using. And so go ahead. So the starting IP address 172.16.0.100, and then the end IP address is 172.16.0.200. And so we're going to give it a length of, I'll go ahead and fix that there. So yeah, we're going to give it a mask of 24, because that's what, if we look back at our diagram, that's how we have it set up, 255.255.255, and then of course the range right there. Hit next. And so this is exclusions. So this is if you were going to exclude a certain set of IP addresses, but we don't need to add any exclusions, so we'll just hit next. And so the least duration, basically it's how long a computer can have that IP address before it needs to be refreshed. and the limit that you set depends on the use case. For example, a cafe may have a lease duration of a couple hours because customers come and go frequently. Sometimes they'll stay in, drink a coffee, do their work, and sometimes if, for example, like let's say if the lease duration were to say 7 days long, then that IP address would be tied up and it couldn't be used by anyone else until the 7 days are up. So it just goes, case by case. But in our case, in our situation, it's 8 days is fine. So we'll go ahead and hit next. Click yes to, I want to configure the options now. And then, so what we're going to go ahead and do is for the router, so go ahead and click, let me see here. Okay, so if we take a look at our diagram again, so what we're trying to do is let our clients, it's going to let our clients be able to access the server and use it as like the gateway. So what we're going to do is apply the IP address of our domain controller, the 172.16.0.1 here. So let's go ahead and put the IP address in. So 172.16.0.1. There we go. Hit add, and then next. And then we're going to go ahead and change this one, 172.16.0.1. I'm going to say add, and then go ahead and remove this one because the internal clients are going to actually be access. They're not going to access the internet directly. We want them to access to get IP addresses directly from the domain controller. So then go ahead and hit next. And then so this is Win Server. That's a different topic for a different day. We're not using that today. So just go ahead and hit next. And then say yes, I want to activate the scope now, and finish. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just go ahead and right click the domain server and click authorize. Well, actually, we already did that, I think. So yeah, so we've already authorized it. And so what we're going to do now is if you look at the leases, so like let's say we down move this. Actually, let me go ahead and make the screen bigger. There you go. So if you look at the scope and you look at address leases, you there's no items in here at the moment because we haven't created our client computer yet. So, but now we have our DNS set up. So before we create our client computer and join it to the domain, we need to make a configuration that allows us to browse the internet from the domain controller. Sorry about that. So normally you wouldn't do this in a production environment, but since it's just a lab, we're just going to go ahead and do that. So go ahead and click configure this local server. So we're going to get out of this. Oh, don't want to get out of the actual virtual machine. Configure this local server. And let's take a look at the graph here. Okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and change the settings here. But basically what we're going to do is, you see where it says IE enhanced security configurations. What we're going to do is click on that and we're going to turn these off. Click OK. And so the reason why we're doing that is because otherwise, before every page loads, it'll just spam you with, "Are you sure you want to move forward?" kind of a prompt. So we're going to use our PowerShell script to create all of the user accounts in Active Directory. That way we'll have a lot of sample users and we'll have to create them manually. So what we'll do is we'll need to download the script from a GitHub repository created by Josh Madakor. He's the one who created the script. And so you'll see all the links below the video. So we'll just go ahead and create, or rather download that script. So let's go to Internet Explorer and wait for this thing to load up. Sometimes it takes a while. Go ahead and use the recommended settings. So what we're going to do is, so I'm just going to type it in, but you can click on the link below, https colon forward slash forward slash. And so we're just going to wait for that to download. Okay, so go ahead and type it in as such, hit enter. And so now you'll see that the Active Directory PowerShell script is here. So we're going to hit uh, save as, and then save it to your desktop, and then go ahead and close out the internet. So you'll see here, go ahead and extract the folder, put it to your home page. And so now if you open up the Active Directory and you see where it says names, so this is actually the list of all the users that we're going to create using the script. And so for what we're going to do is go ahead and put in your first and last name. It's gonna make it a lot easier to complete the project. It'll, I guess you could say it gives it a little more realism. And so what we're gonna do is save it, and you can just leave it as is. Desktop names, save it. Go ahead and replace it, and then close out of that. And so let's go ahead and close this here. So go ahead and click Start and go to the Windows PowerShell, this one right here, and then make sure you go to PowerShell ISE, just the regular one, and right click it, go to More, and then do Run as Administrator. Say yes, and wait for it to load. Okay, so now go ahead and click on the folder icon. Go to desktop. Here we go. Create users. There we are. And so there's a lot that's going on here with the script, but before we can run anything, first we need to do is enable the execution of all scripts. Otherwise, the PowerShell will just keep giving us an error message. So take a look. So if I hit run right now, I keep getting this error message, it cannot be loaded, so on and so forth, right? So what we're going to need to do is run the command set execution policy unrestricted. So set. And again, this is just for lab purposes. You definitely don't want to run this. You definitely don't want to run this one, this command in a production environment. hit enter, and then you're going to want to say yes to all. So basically, it, the reason you don't want to run it and the reason why it's set up as a default security feature is because it prevents scripts that you don't want to run from executing. So let's see here. In a nutshell, the list of the names is going to be put inside of an array, and the user accounts will be given a default password and username. Also, the script is going to display creating user as it creates each account to give us a visual of the creation progress. So now what we need to do is change the directory where the script is located. Now just give me 1 second here. You see how it says system32? So what we're going to need to do is use the command cd for change directory. We're going to do c colon users. Oh, forgot the slash here, backslash users. Then you go backslash a. You're going to use the a dash, the name that you made, and then you're going to do the desktop, and then you're going to do the folder that we have here. So the Active Directory PowerShell master. Hit enter, and so now this is where we can execute. We can go ahead and run run the script. So let's see. And don't worry if while you run the script you start noticing some error messages as it's, so go ahead and click run once here. But don't, yeah, so if you start to see how it says creating user and it has all the usernames here, yeah, but you may start seeing some errors as I was saying earlier before. It's because it's a long list of names and there are, I think there's a couple duplicates, and so that's where the error is coming from. So it's just going to skip over the duplicates. So don't worry too much about that, and then just let it run. Okay, so now that it's finished creating all the users, let's go ahead and if we take a look back at the Active Directory users and computers folder, so go ahead under Administrative Tools, Active Directory users and computers. So let me go ahead and lower this down here. So you can now see that there is a users folder that's been created, and these are all the users that we just made actually. And so yeah, so the script has completed its task. So now what we'll do is go ahead and right click on the domain and click find and try to search for yourself. So let's see, if we type in the first initial last name and then hit find now, there we are. So we can see that we show up in the domain that we just created. So now what you go ahead and do is double click on your name and click account, and then so you'll notice you're part of you're part of the domain. But you can also check this as well. If you just type in just your last name, Kennedy in my case, you'll notice that the admin account that we created earlier is also on here. So if you check here, you see that's the admin account that we had just created. Okay, so now that we have all of our users created in our environment, let's go ahead and take a look back at the diagram. So we're just about done. Our internet's connected, our NICs have been configured, and our environment is set up. So we have NAT configured, DHCP is connected to the internal network, and the last thing on our list is to create the machine. So internet, internal NIC, we just created the domain, the remote access, and the DHCP with the IP address scope. Okay, so The next thing on our list here, let's go ahead and minimize our domain controller virtual machine and bring up VirtualBox again. That way we can create our Windows 10 machine. So let's go ahead and click New. And so we're going to call this one Client 1, like we have in our diagram. This is going to be Windows 10 64-bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and increase it to 4 gigabytes for the RAM. And then just keep clicking next, next, next. Leave that as is. And so now what we're going to do is go ahead, like before, click Settings, and then go to System, Processor. I give it 2. Let's see if we can get it to go to 2 here. Boom. And then what we're going to do is go to the network, and we're going to change this one to internal network because if you remember, let's take a look back at the diagram. Since we're creating the client 1 Windows, it's going to be inside. It's going to be getting its address from the domain controller via the DHCP. So we're going to connect it to the domain. So that's why we're going to change it to internal. So we're set right there. And then let's go ahead and click on the storage devices. Click choose a disk. And then for the Windows 10, we're actually going to go to wherever you downloaded the Windows 10. Windows 10 ISO. Go ahead and click that there. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to emulate a corporate network. Okay, so hit the OK, and now we're going to power it on. So wait for it to finish installing. It takes a second. Okay, so hit next, install now. Accept the license terms. Next. Do the custom install. Next. And then we just wait for it to finish installing. Okay, so it's finished installing. So for our configuration, just go ahead and click ES here for United States. And it's just going to restart. Take some time. I mean, hit yes for US. You skip. And then for this one, just go ahead and say I don't have an internet. Alright, so continue with limited setup. And so this one, like we said, we're going to call this one client 1. And same password. And then for this one, you can just kind of create like whatever. Oh yeah, you can just make up whatever you want for this. It's not really necessary. Let's skip that. 2, and skip that. And then just go ahead and select no for each of these. And
and then not now. Okay, so now it's going to load up. It does take a while, so once it's done, I'll be right back.
Nice. Okay, so we have everything set up. So Windows 10 is good. So first, let's just check that we have an internet connection. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to the start search bar. We're going to type in CMD for command, and we're going to go ahead and do ipconfig to see what our configurations are. So IP config. So basically, what we should see is an IP address, a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and the default gateway that we had on our diagram of 172.16.0.1. So let's check that out. Okay, so our IP address, yep, here's the 172.16.0.100, and here's the subnet mask, and of course our default gateway. So everything's looking good so far. Now, we want to confirm that we are able to get something from the internet. So let's try to ping, see if we can ping the internet. So let's just do www.google.com. Let's see if we get an echo reply. So if you get all four packets, everything looks good. Everything looks good. Excellent. Zero loss. Zero loss. So that means that we are getting an internet connection between our internal um, host and the internet. So since we're able to ping, that means that our entire infrastructure is working. So we have connectivity to the default gateway, which is the domain controller, and the domain controller is natting it and forwarding it to the internet. And our ping can come back to us as an echo reply. So before moving forward, let's just change the PC name and join the domain simultaneously. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and right click on the start bar here and go to System. And then what we'll do is scroll to the bottom this time instead of clicking on change name. So scroll all the way to the bottom, and then what you'll see is rename this PC Advanced, and then click change. All right, so here, this is where we're going to call our new host client one, CLIENT one. And then we're going to change this so we can add it to the domain. And the domain, of course, is mydomain.com. Mydomain.com. Hit OK. Now here we need to type password from the account that's allowed to join the domain. So go ahead and type in your regular password. So the username that we'll use is, well, let's see if we can use our regular see if we can use our regular account, not necessarily the admin account. So N Kennedy and then PASSWORD1. Make sure the password is fine. Password one. Wait for this to load up. Welcome to mydomain.com. Perfect. So that actually worked. So we have to restart. So okay. So let it reboot the system. Go ahead and close this and restart now. So while it's restarting, let's go back to the domain controller and go to the DHCP. So let's take a look at the DHCP. Okay, let's log in. Okay, we can close out of this and this, close out of this, and this, of course. Okay, let's go to the server. So let's go to DHCP. So yeah, so again, tools, and then scroll down to DHCP. And now what we're going to do is take a look at the scope that we created. So IPv4, let's go ahead, I'm going to widen this out a little bit. Okay. So here is the scope that we created, the 172, 100 to 200. And so let's expand it a little bit. So we can see here, address reservations. I'm just going to make the window a little bigger. So now we can see that the client that we had, the 172.16.0.100, is actually client 1, which we just renamed, and it's one of our leases. So that means that it's connected to the domain. So when we created our client computer and joined it to the network, it reached out to the DHCP server automatically and requested an address. Then the DHCP server gave it an address, and that's why we're able to see the lease. One more thing to look at is the Active Directory users and computers. So let's go ahead and click Start, go to Administrative Tools, and then the Active Directory users and computers. So click on the computers container, and there it is. There's client one after having joined it to the domain. So now we can log in using any of our user accounts that we created earlier. So let's give it a shot. So we'll go back to Windows 10, machine client one. So let's take a look, see if it's finished, and it looks like it is. We shall take a look, insert, and type in the password that we used. Oh no, sorry. We're gonna, let me see. So we're gonna go to the other user, and so let's type in our name. So the first initial last name, Nkennedy, and then let's try our password. Perfect, it looks like it's working. Now it's gonna configure the user's account. And yeah, that looks like everything's working out pretty good. And there you have it. So our client one is configured. So looking back at our diagram, what we've done is we've created a mini corporate network. And so that pretty much wraps up the lab. So as you can see, we first installed the VirtualBox, the ISO for Windows 10, Server 2019. We created our domain controller, provided it with two NICs, one for the internet that is being provided by the host network. We also provided it with an internal NIC so that it could so that it could use itself as a DHCP server and as the DNS for the internal client that we have here at the Windows 10. And so that's why when we configured the second virtual machine, we made the NIC only be used we created it as internal. And then after we created the domain controller, we installed the Active Directory domain service so we could create our domain. And then we installed the remote access service and network address translation. So that way we could remotely communicate between our client on, on the inside of the network and then our domain controller. And we also created a DHCP configuration so that our domain controller could provide an IP address to the internal network. And that's pretty much wraps it up. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and stay tuned for more projects.